All right, everyone. Just everyone can grab a seat. There aren't enough seats for everyone, as you probably found out. So I just want to welcome everyone to our third Sports and Tech Meetup. My name is Dave Collins, and I'm one of the co-organizers, along with Mike Frank. I work here at AECOM in our Strategy Plus group. And if you're curious about some of the design work we're doing, please come find me after the presentation. But without further ado, I just want to introduce our co-organizer and moderator for tonight, Michael Frank.
All right, thanks a lot, Dave. Okay, great to have everyone. We are way too big for the space, which is awesome. These things are great, so I'm excited. Okay, thanks again to AECOM. They're sponsoring it. We have Bill on the panel, so we'll hear more about what they do, but much appreciated. Okay, quick housekeeping. We're in the midst of planning the next few events. Basically, if you have a great idea for a panel, if you want to be on a panel, send me an email. We're going to try to do a lot of these this year, so it'll be fun. And lastly, if you're going to tweet about the event, we encourage it. That's great. The hashtag is sports and tech, so hopefully you'll see a lot of stuff. All right, now on to our panelists. We've got a great crew as always. To my right, we have Chip Bowers. Chip is the Chief Marketing Officer of the Warriors. He was previously Senior VP for the Magic and for the SuperSonics. And outside of the San Francisco teams, of course, he's a fan of the Carolina teams, so the Panthers and anything North Carolina. To his right, we have David Kaval. David is the president of the San Jose Earthquake, the co-founder of the Golden Baseball League, and a Cleveland Browns fan, so that's he's a tough guy. Bill Crockett, Evan Owens, to his right, is the co-founder and CEO of Pogoseat, and he's from Oregon, so he's a fan of the Trailblazers and the Ducks. And finally, Bill Crockett's the Director of Sports Architecture at AECOM. He's been the architect of record for many NBA, NFL, NCAA, and Olympic stadiums and arenas, including the new Warriors arena. And he's a fan of, a lot of these people are fans of these local sports teams, as well as the hometown Kansas City Chiefs. So anyway, we'll go for like 40 minutes as always, and then we'll get into some Q&A. So save your questions for the end, and we'll get to you. So let's start out with kind of the obvious question. And this is sort of especially geared towards the people who represent teams on the panel. So I'm a huge sports fan, but I haven't gone to that many games this year. And that's because I have a really comfortable living room. I have 45 inches of screen sometimes, and 90 inches of screen other times. So it's hard to get motivated to go to the game. So how are you guys solving that problem? And how do you sort of think about how to use technology to solve that? You guys can just go down the line, I guess.
Okay, perfect. For the record, by the way, I'm pulling for the 49ers. I want to thank because I work for the Warriors. I don't support our hometown teams. I have some good friends there, so I hope that they do well and win because the Panthers won't see a Super Bowl for a long time. It's an interesting question. We get asked it all the time, and I always kind of think back to what people said when pay-per-view came out, which is, when are we going to move theater again? And I think the one interesting thing about digital platforms is that they do an excellent job of creating communities, the same kind of communities we try to create inside the facility. I guess if you look at kind of down the line of the way we look at it, it starts, I think, with Comcast Sportsnet, our TV rights partner, and what kind of broadcast do they put together so that when people do see the game at home, what is that experience like? What do they see in terms of what's happening inside the facility? How do they address the community within the building? How do we use them as a platform to drive some of our digital ideas or initiatives so that, again, we're engaging people at home? One of the small things that we've done this year is that we've actually created, if you come to a game, you get your tip-off magazine. It's the small printed program that in all candor, really hasn't amounted to much. 8 ads and probably 2.5 pages of content, a roster card. That was about it. What we try to do is make it a digital platform. We stop printing it and handing it out the doors. We put it on our app, and we ask people to download the app so that whether you're in the arena or you're at home sitting on your couch, you can feel like you're part of that experience, just like the person in the building. You got your roster card right in front of you. For both teams, you can see some of the latest articles that are being written about the team, some of the human interest things that we've got going on in the community. So, that's one small element of that. The other thing, obviously, obviously that we do like everybody else is we tweet a lot during the games. We try to take advantage of that experience. We also try to get people to take photos of what's happening. One of the things that we've had a lot of success with this year is our Warriors ground positioning. So, as you know, if you're a Warriors fan or been to a Warriors game, we have one of the best, if not the best, NBA crowds. Really into the game. I mean, yesterday we had a 1 o'clock start against the Clippers, and yes, they've now turned into, we believe, the Warriors and Clippers have like this big rivalry.
That would help if I turned it on. I am the most technologically savvy person in the room again. The reality is that when you play a team like the Clippers at 1 o'clock on a Monday, you'd expect it to be a lot of families and a lot of kids and a lot of group and not a whole lot of engagement. The place was rocking 30 seconds into the game yesterday. And so we've actually gotten fans to take pictures and do hashtag Warriors Ground. We want the Warriors ground position to be, you're a Warrior wherever you are. If you're at home on the couch, if you're in a bar, if you're at your friend's house, if you're having dinner with your wife and you're not supposed to be looking at the phone, we want you to feel like at that given moment while we're playing, you've taken over and is now Warriors ground. And so that starts in the building, and we want that to leak out in the community and the marketplace. And so we've had a lot of success. I think the other night, I think it was, what game was that? Kevin, what game? We have 400 people send out a Warriors ground hashtag with photo in like the first half hour.
Yeah, it was the first Clipper game.
First Clipper game. So we had 400 people in about a half hour to an hour send out Warriors ground hashtag with photos, and then wearing t-shirts, supporting the team, both in the arena and outside. So a lot of success with that.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us in association football soccer, I think we have a great advantage because I think our game is actually very conducive to watching it in person. It's a fast game. You're there, you're focused on the actual match and what's happening on the pitch. And so actually I think with all the technological progress with, all the different second screens and everything, soccer can actually take advantage of that, and I think that's a differentiator for our sport. And so one thing that we really try to focus on is our game day experience. I mean, if you come to our games, we have the ultras who are our supporters. Yes, ultras right there. We got one in the house. So it's like going to Europe and seeing people stand with tifo, which are amazing displays that are of our players, of different basically almost like posters and things like that, flags, chanting. It's an experience that if you're just a casual fan, you almost want to come just to see them. I mean, it's like a totally different way to experience sports in North America. And so I think if you came to a Quakes game and you saw that, you'd almost be kind of shocked that you have that kind of culture here in the United States. And I think it's especially appealing to kind of Gen Y, 18 to 24-year-old, 18 to 30-year-old, and you can see that in our demographics of our fans. And then I think the other thing we've really tried to do is organically embrace social media. And one thing we did this last year is the team had 11 come from behind wins in stoppage time, which was a league record, and we kept scoring right at the end of the game. And so we had this whole thing where after one of the games, one of our players, Stephen Leonard, was interviewed, and he said, "Goonies never say die," from the movie Goonies, if anyone's seen the movie Goonies. And so we created the hashtag Goonies never say die. And this was an absolute phenomenon across soccer. And so whenever we were in the stoppage time, boom, people started, tweeting that out and putting it on Facebook and doing all this stuff and getting all excited about it. And bam, we would score again, and then it would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I think there are ways to harness kind of the organic nature of sports using technology as opposed to kind of like forcing it down people's throats to create an experience that's really unique. And that's kind of what we're doing with Quakes.
Yeah, so Evan and Bill, I'd sort of be interested on your perspective of this. Sort of as operators, how do you guys sort of see your role as, almost third parties kind of helping contribute to moving this game experience forward?
Yeah, sure. No, I think it's a great question. At least myself personally, when I watch a game at home, I definitely have my iPhone right next to me, and I'm probably on my laptop, doing email or surfing the net or whatnot. So I want that experience of the game as well. Not my laptop, but my phone. I think we'll touch on it later tonight, but of course having Wi-Fi and good cell reception is huge. I know the Warriors lead that march in the NBA. The second thing I'd say, and both these guys touched on it, is the fan engagement piece is so huge. So whether it's the Warriors Ground campaign or whatnot, it's really important to connect to people. So we were at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytic Conference last year, and Ticketmaster gave a presentation, and one thing they said was, which blew me away, I think it was 40% of fans go to live events to meet new people. So anything that these teams can do to connect people when you're there. So from Pogoseat's perspective, one thing we're working on is, we do mobile, we're a mobile app for live event seat upgrades, if you didn't know, but one thing we're working on is social seat search. So when you go to a game, you can upgrade to friends or people like you, so maybe families or business contacts or whatnot. So you can meet new people at the game or, impress a hot date or whatever it is. So all these things you can do at a live event that you can't do at home, is what gets fans off their couch into the live event.
I think what I'd add from my perspective is, I can't help it, I think like an architect. So we start with the venue itself and making it as absolutely as intense and focused on elevating the game itself and the experience for the fans. So, and by the way, what a time to live in this area. The Sea Giants doing pretty well, 49ers doing pretty well, Warriors no doubt going to the playoffs, right? So incredible time to be. But I do believe that the quality of the venue. It's good luck here tonight. Yeah, exactly. But with the venue being optimized, the other thing that I think we can try to control is, and it takes into account everything that's been said already, is people want to have variety and want to be able to change. They don't want to experience the event the same way every time or year after year. So we build in the flexibility to change that. And I think the thing that's really inspiring for us is our successful clients, our most successful clients, are willing to reach out almost continually, real time, and find out what it is that their patrons are looking for, that will give them a reason to get out of their big screen living room and get out in person in the venue.
Great. So one of the really interesting things about these two teams in particular, and probably a lot of the teams Bill works with, is they have new stadiums coming. The Warriors have a new stadium hopefully coming in San Francisco soon. The Earthquakes have a new stadium coming in Santa Clara or San Jose?
San Jose.
San Jose.
It's under construction now.
Yeah. So one of the things that seems fascinating to me is, so right now, I'm in pitches 10 times a week, and it's like, okay, mobile this, social that. But you guys aren't building structures for the next 5 years. You're building for this technology paradigm that might be the next 40 years. How do you build a structure that's beautiful and people love to go to, but also that's going to support technology we probably can't even imagine yet?
Great question. I think it's our biggest fear as part of this new project that we're working on is how do we make something that's relevant for 10 to 15 years after we open the doors, not just year one. I think the overriding thought process is that we can't lose sight of the things that we think matter most. And I think it gets back to that initial question is one of the things that we don't want to do is create silos for our fan base. I think if you create community engagement, if you give people a way to interact with them when they're in the building, when they're outside of the building, I think that's key. The last thing we want, and I got to tell you that there's a pretty good debate going on inside NBA circles, which some of you will find of interest, is led somewhat by Mark Cuban, which is he's not a fan of people using PDAs at games. As far as he's concerned, they get rid of their website. He just is, and this comes from a guy who started Broadcast.com. I mean, the reality is he's scared to death that people are going to pay too much attention to their phone and not pay attention to what makes their event unique and different. And I'm not saying that's not right, but I certainly think that has to be taken into consideration. So as we go into our new building, I look at it through the prism of how do we make the event that much easier for people to enjoy. And so there's a lot of thought that has to go into that. I mean, you take Pogoseat, for instance. I think that's a great platform that gives people an opportunity to come to a game and through an opportunity to upgrade their seat, have a unique experience or something different than what they expected when they walked through the doors. There's a lot of discussion around companies like Bypass Lane, of which we're a believer in as well. How do you get people access to vending or concession opportunities without having to wait in long lines? That's great, but there's a lot of challenges on the back end in terms of how that works with the concessionaire. So how do you work through that process in a way that you communicate to people in a way that actually resonates with them individually, doesn't create another opportunity for there to be disconnects on the back end? And that's typically where we find our businesses. It evolves so quickly that a lot of times people get out in front of it too far without a whole lot of thought in terms of what the domino effect is tied to that particular technology. So, I don't know that we have the answers in all candor. I think what we do know is that we have to continue to think broadly, not have a narrow point of view. I think we have to continue to think about the way that the business is going and where the sport's going, not necessarily solely where technology's going. I think we have to think about the event, we have to think about the experience, we have to think about the entertainment value, and then you've got to find the right platforms to integrate into that so that you don't overextend yourselves or really provide something to the end user that's ultimately not as of much value as you had hoped, because then you lose a customer, you lose someone who you hope to have a lifetime value of X tied to your brand.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've been really focused with our stadium on just providing really good Wi-Fi that actually works. That's like, seriously, that's my only one overarching goal with the technology thing, because, I mean, when I go to Stanford to try to watch a game, I can't get my phone to work, can't even get a text to work. I've had that problem at AT&T Park, and it's called AT&T Park, and so, you know, luckily, our stadium's only 18,000 seats, and our current stadium's only 10,000 seats. So our current stadium, you actually have 3G and 4G that basically work, because there's not that many people. So our current stadium has really become a laboratory for a lot of companies, whether it's been FanZone, which is kind of like a Twitter aggregation tool, or Yorder, where you can actually order food and it's delivered to you, or even merchandise that's delivered to you, to your seat. During the match, because in soccer people don't want to move around. They want to watch the actual game. If you're on the concourse during a soccer game, it's just a ghost town. There's nobody there. And so what we've been really focused on is keeping that trend at our new stadium, where you can go there and we have free Wi-Fi and it works, and then empowering our fans to create apps that can actually run on that and they can be the people who are being, innovative and creative. And I think we have a perfect community for that here in Silicon Valley. And so what we're really focused on is building that infrastructure backbone and just letting people run with it. And obviously we know Wi-Fi is kind of here to stay. I always remember a story around this lines that actually relates to Mark Cuban. When he first bought the Mavericks, he went over to American Airlines and he goes, I want to have a USB port in every seat. So everyone can plug in, it's going to be great. They're like, what's it going to cost, like $800,000? You sure you want to do it? He's like, yeah, I want to do it. Well, like 6 months later, Wi-Fi came. And you didn't even, so they made that huge investment, and where did it get you? And so whenever I think about investments in our stadium, I always think about that story. And I think, hey, let's get Wi-Fi going. Let's make sure we make the right investments and we partner with the right technology providers to make sure it's really broadband and it works. And then let's let our fans and the community here and the right partners actually develop the really innovative things and give them the ability to do it. Because I think a lot of other leagues restrict the ability for these other people to actually create apps for them. MLS has been very proactive. Obviously, we're more of a challenger league. We allow a lot of this stuff at our stadiums, and I think because of that, we can see a lot of innovation and we can see a lot of really cool apps at the games.
Yeah, let's go now to Bill, and we'll come back to you with the next question. Bill, how do you think about literally designing these structures that are flexible technologically for the future?
Well, no offense to anyone in the room, I think we've got an interesting spectrum of demographic here, but from our perspective, we want it to be transparent. We want it to be the bandwidth and the depth to be able to be flexible in the future, ever changing, but not impact, certainly not negatively, the enjoyment of the event. And I think a good example would be, and one of our clients told me, probably nobody more so than historically, at least, professional franchise leaders have been looking at whatever building just opened or whoever just got the newest board or you name it, and they always look at that as a benchmark, inevitably, frankly, good or bad. And 2 facilities in NBA opened this season with major new investments. I think Houston and Indianapolis, but these boards that I call them boxcar boards. They're like a mini version of what was done in Houston. And my personal opinion is the jury is absolutely out as to whether that's actually a trade up for the fan experience. And there's a whole philosophy behind that. But we want to really study the ability to improve the fan experience, but not create something that's a distraction from the event.
Great. So probably a good portion of the people in this room are startups. So basically there's all these new technologies, and we're not exactly sure which ones are going to catch on and which ones won't. And a lot of the innovations coming from these small, relatively unproven players. As a team, as the Golden State Warriors, as the Earthquakes, how do you think about saying, okay, Pogoseat's a company, or any of the other companies here, that we're willing to, put some investment into? And I'd say, how do you kind of try to filter through that? And I'd say probably even more challenging, as Pogoseat, Evan, and you can start this one, how do you actually get into these stadiums and say, okay, we've never been in a stadium before, but hey, spend some time and adopt us and put us in front of 20,000 fans?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'll tell all you guys, you probably know already, but it's incredibly difficult. There's a few things you have to do. I think the most important is to make your product or service a no-risk product or service. So, talking to the Warriors, like, listen, we're not going to upset your fans in any way. We're not going to lessen your premium inventory. We give these reasons because they don't want to take a risk on us and then blow up their fan base. So that's number one. Number two, you have to have a crystal clear value proposition to their fans. So Chip mentioned it. We've talked to Mark Cuban. He's right. Cuban hates smartphones. He wants to ban them all, because he wants people to pay attention to the game. And I understand that, but there is a place for certain products that add real-time value, and I think Pogoseat's one of them, of course. You can go to a game, you can upgrade your seat in real time, get closer to the action. So for me, that's a no-brainer. Another selling point for us teams is it's no cost. Our business model is a revenue share, so if the Warriors are making money off seat upgrades, we make money. Our app is free, our data analytics are free. And then, of course, you have your marketing and customer support plans, and you supplement the teams. So those are a few things you can do to land a client.
Great. So one of the things that I think we think a lot about is data. And I think probably the most amazing thing about cell phones are where everyone is all the time. So now we have data probably to different levels about where your customers are, what they're buying, when they're buying tickets. How do you think about using that data, in particular like location data, for sort of crafting stadium experiences that are more compelling?
I think the answer to the question is the answer to the question in our eyes is we address it aggressively. I think whether we all like it or not, the reality is the Minority Report, culture is here, and it's the only way that, in order for us to do our jobs well, we've got to be smart at what we do. I mean, casinos and credit card companies have been doing it for years, unfortunately, and airlines. I think the business of sports has been a little slow to adapt over time. I think we've got to, certainly in this market, the Warriors have to be a thought leader in that in terms of the NBA circles. And so, for us, we're already putting thoughts into our new building in terms of what does a ticket look like. Most teams are going to the route of digital tickets. That's great. They have it on their PDA. But is there some other near-field communication device that could be utilized that could house an account that also serves as a bank account that is your ticket, is your bank account, it then sends information as you walk through the threshold of your retail store that then tells someone with a tablet that, hi, my name is Chip Bowers, I'm a season ticket holder, I just bought Harrison Barnes' road jersey in a large last week. Someone's walking up saying, by the way, Chip, guess what? We now have it in home and the alt jersey. We then mark that down, it's tracked through a CRM. I'm up for renewal that year. My favorite player is Harrison Barnes because I bought 3 Harrison Barnes jerseys, and I noticed that I tweeted about him 4 times through some investment we've made in Radiant 6 or some other, Salesforce or like platform, and the next thing you know, you get a Harrison Barnes phone call when it's time for you to renew. I mean, that's where we want to be, and we got to get there quickly. I think to your point, we approach it head on, and the more information we can get, we've got to build out an internal analytics team. We've got to get all that data. We've got to have the platforms that allow us to extract the data in a meaningful way. Then we have to have a team internally that builds that and then helps our salespeople understand how best to utilize it.
So just to sort of drill down on that a little bit. So, a lot of what you're saying makes sense, integration from like the CRM social listening side all the way to, point of sale and understanding how those people are sort of moving through the funnel. So when you talked about building an internal analytics team, what does that mean for you guys? Like, what kind of investments do you guys have to make to really feel like you're getting value out of all this stuff?
Well, first and foremost, I think we've got to invest in the people to be prepared for the platforms that we have to invest in. I'm scared to death that we're going to start investing in a lot of platforms and get all this great information. There's no one there to dissect it and understand it. And so we are actually looking at hiring a chief digital officer as we speak. That person will be charged for ramping up our CRM efforts, helping us understand what kind of platforms we need to invest in terms of tracking social monitoring, everything from email databases, text databases, you name it. Taking all that information, start building a pretty good foundation so that when we make future investments, we're then adding on and being more strategic about how to utilize information. So, I did this in Orlando, was part of a team that did it, and we hired a couple people from Goldman Sachs and a couple of other people that were just young and aggressive and a hell of a lot smarter than me, and they're the ones who actually put it all together. And the team that, the other thing, by the way, that we haven't mentioned is the monetization of this whole thing, and I'm sure Dave's got a lot of great insight into that too for the Quakes. But one of the things that we've got to really truly understand is, okay, once we get this information, how do we apply that to corporate partnerships? How do we apply that to in-market retail programs? What are people purchasing? Are they buying more Pepsi products because our logo's on it? And if so, where are they buying it? How often are they buying it? And what SKU are they buying it? Because ultimately that helps us monetize that renewal deal that may be $500,000 to $600,000 one year, and we want it to be $1 million plus the next. We've got to be able to show how the deal is quantified.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, we actually have a business intelligence department with the Quakes. I think we're the only MLS team that has that. And it's basically, got some Stanford PhDs and really smart guys, a lot smarter than me. And, basically they're looking at two sides of the coin here. One is on the business side. How do we find out more information about our customers and also how that relates to our commercial partners? Secondly, how do we harvest all the data on the player side and the sports science side? How do I look at my players' biometric information during the game and determine if players are maybe playing injured and things of that nature? Those are ways to help my business as well. And so we're looking at that. That department goes over both those areas. And the exciting thing on the sports side with soccer is that unlike baseball, where you kind of know OPS and a lot of these statistics, kind of have it figured out, in soccer it's not figured out. And that's a huge opportunity for us with the Earthquakes to actually use our team and our league as a laboratory where we can find out data and the deterministic variables so that we can import that or maybe export those ideas to Europe and to other teams where their salaries aren't 5 or 10 million, they're hundreds of millions. And so the difference there could be tremendous. And so for us, that's a really exciting part. On the business side, one thing we're looking really closely at is driving television viewership. And so one thing we're doing is we're trying to put rewards in place with our customers based on where they are, their geo-targeted information, to see if they're actually watching our games and things of that nature. So we'd have a telecast or something like that, and then there'd be some phrase uttered on the game. So in order for them to win or to get points, which could enter you in drawings, or to get to the stadium earlier, you would have to tweet out, whatever that phrase is that the actual broadcaster says. So then I know more people are watching the game, they're getting rewards, which they like, they're already watching the games, it's great, and we're actually tracking where they are and what they're doing. And so those are all things quantifiably that we're doing right now that's actually made a difference. And our local ratings were up 25%. So I mean, there were discernible impacts to this that help us when we renegotiate with Comcast and things like that. So.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in how you guys are thinking about using all the data you have. I'm sure dynamic pricing is probably on the product roadmap if it's not already being implemented, and sort of how you're looking at ticketing behaviors and other behaviors to optimize your experience.
Yeah, sure. Chip and Dave already touched on it, but collecting and gathering the data isn't the problem. It's distilling it into actionable items. And so one thing tangible we're doing right now is, for example, we can monitor fans that upgrade a certain section. So if we see Dave, for example, at a Warriors game, upgrade to section 105 3 games in a row, we can talk to his, the Warriors ticket office and be like, hey, Dave might be right for a season ticket sales package, and they can follow up a call. So, that's one thing we're doing. But of course, we're collecting 2,000 plus data points throughout each game. And so one of the big ones for us is when fans connect their social networks. So then I think right now we're averaging, a fan has about an average of 120 Facebook fans that connects through Pogoseat when they upgrade. So that's a great way for us, to send that information to the Warriors so they know who their fans are and they get all that demographic data to help them market and sell tickets and whatnot. So.
Terrific. And Bill, how are you taking all this data, and how's that affect the design process?
Just occurs to me there's an example of, and I won't name names, but we have a professional client that I think was presented with a situation where a crisis is an opportunity, and the league came to them and pointed out to them that they had far more individual sponsors than several other clubs might have combined, and it sounds good, except the dollar value for those contracts is really small. And so part of the analysis was, what do we do with that information? How do we convert that? And it translated to the fact that their building hadn't had anything done to it for many years, and there's just a real decline in the value of their inventory for advertising and sponsorship. So it was a great challenge to say, okay, how do we create new inventory, new value, new meaning? And actually it stitched together a lot of the kinds of data that you're talking about now in terms of knowing their demographic, knowing the season ticket profile. We were able to kind of target different areas that would create new value that had previously not existed. So creating a whole new business plan for them. It's pretty fun for us.
Great. So touching on that, I've looked at a little bit of the data on what happens when you have a new stadium. It looks like there's pretty consistently like a 6-year attendance bump. And that might vary a little bit, but that seems pretty consistent. But as you talked about, there's other experiences you care about. There's concession stands. There's the social aspects, whether it's getting 50% of your audience congregating before a soccer game, or whatever that is. How are you sort of taking these other goals and specifically designing around them? Like, does it mean bigger open spaces? Does it mean different kinds of content during dead time? And how are you sort of approaching design in that way?
Let me just start this by saying I really sincerely believe all of our clients should just plan to replace their buildings every 7 years.
It's a good business plan.
Very good business plan. Simple, straightforward answer.
I chuckle because Bill and I just concluded a 2-month programming exercise with Emily and some other folks here in the room, and I think they might have gotten more than they bargained for. To answer your question, I mean, you throw a million ideas against a wall, some of which actually make sense, most of which don't, but it's worth having the conversation anyway. I mean, I think, you hear a lot about in our business the door-to-door experience. And I think thanks to social media and digital platforms, that's completely changed. I think it's every waking moment of every minute of every day for the rest of your life experience. I don't know how you differentiate the second you leave your home to the second you walk into the door into the facility. So, we're talking about digital things that obviously everybody else is talking about, but the reality is, my fear again is we're going to be behind the curve when this thing opens. But, push notifications when you're 4 blocks within the facility to say, there's a concert coming up because we recognize your profile, and you may be, God forbid if the Stones are playing in 5 years, we're in trouble. But the Stones concert is coming to the new facility, or the circus, or the Warriors game, or we noticed that you bought the Warriors-Clippers game last time you came, and you're a single game buyer, and the Clippers are coming in a week, and you're having lunch around the corner, and how do we let you know that there's still great seats available? Right, so that's just off-site. And then when you get to the site itself, there's a lot of things that, in our venue, we got to think about. 200 plus events a year, and we're going to, oversee the lion's share of those. What are we doing for concerts, and how is that different than family shows, and how is that different than ice shows, and how is that different from basketball games, and a collegiate event versus a professional event, and the list goes on and on and on. So, there's no real easy answer other than you've got to turn over every single rock, and you've got to think about it in as broad and big a picture as you possibly can, so that you don't, you don't limit your capabilities or your opportunities.
Yeah, one thing we've tried to do is really have a lot of flexible space. We have an area, the way our stadium lays out, you go online, sjearthquakes.com and see it, it's an open horseshoe. And that was, originally we were approved for 18,000 seats. Over time, maybe we'd want to expand the stadium so then we could actually enclose it. But one nice thing is that it creates an open area. We call it the epicenter because we're the earthquakes. And that's an area where you can actually stand there, it's almost 4 acres, and look back into the stadium on the pitch and actually watch it. And the thing that kind of balances the stadium that connects that area to the field is this huge scoreboard bar, which is the largest exterior bar in North America, 407 linear square feet of bar space. So it's going to be plenty of room to get a bar and get a beer. So that area is really cool. And so that area is very unique. It's something that's a distinguishing item, and it's something that can draw people. And so I feel that you need those things for when you build a stadium, and you need to be able to have flexible space that over, in year 4 or year 6, you need to change some of these things out. And you need to keep it fresh. And if you don't do that, then people will kind of feel that the programming has kind of gotten stale, and that's going to create less value. So I think having the flexibility to be able to do that over time, you have to pre-program that into your original design for the venue.
Real quick to piggyback that, it's an excellent point. And one of the things that I think is making a lot of sense to us as we go through our exercise in the new facility is that we've talked a little bit about these 100 little moments, and I may be misguided, but I don't know that there's probably less than 5% of those are technology-based. I mean, our overarching theme is that it needs to be an extremely technologically advanced facility, whatever that means, but it's about iconic experiences, and that's exactly what you've detailed, things that stand the test of time so that people want to come back time and time again. Those are the things that we can program and build and design in a way that makes sense not just today, but in the future, and those are ideas like the bar, great idea, the epicenter, right? That's going to be something that they're known for. And everybody's going to say, I got to go to a Quakes game because I got to see that, right? So we've got to figure out what that means to us and the Warriors in our new facility.
Mike, can I add something to you? Both great points. We were meeting with the 49ers last summer, and we talked with Kunal Malik, who comes from Facebook. He's a very intelligent guy. And he has this grand vision for the Niners' new park that they're building, of course. And, you know, his whole thing is soup to nuts. Like, when I go to a game, I want parking to be dialed in. Like, you know, no lines, get my spot. I want to walk up, easy to get a beer, like Dave said. I want no bathroom lines. I want to upgrade my seat right away with a push notification telling me it's available. Like, everything completely dialed in. Like, that's the future of 5 years of going to sporting events. And I'm sure all these guys are working on that. So,
I mean, it kind of reminds me, who here has flown Virgin America?
Love it.
Yeah, so like, when I think about the experience at a Quakes game in our new stadium, I'm like, I want to be the Virgin America of pro sports teams, where you're kind of thinking about things in a different way. It's like, instead of just sending the cart up and down the aisle when you're not really thirsty or you don't want any food, you just have a technology to order at any time. And those are the kind of experiential things that if you really think about the perspective of an actual customer and a fan, and you get in their shoes and you are a fan, you can actually program those things, and hopefully you're in a situation where you control enough of it and you can actually make it happen. Because I think on a lot of these big projects, they get kind of a life of their own, and you lose that kind of touch, that kind of you know, ownership kind of the experience from the fan perspective. And so that's one thing that we've been really keen on in designing our stadium and building it, is that it has that fan, you know, forward kind of view. And I think that's really important to be successful.
Great. So let's talk, there's sort of two main things I want to cover before we stop. One is, let's start with dead time. So soccer's a little different, but for most sports, you know, basketball you might go for 3 hours and there's 48 minutes. Football, you have an hour of game time and 3 hours or 4 hours of experience. So you have a lot of dead time. It seems like you can do a lot of things with that dead time. What are your goals for that dead time? And then how do you say, okay, you know, I want to create better concessions. I want to, you know, accomplish whatever the Kiss Cam accomplishes. And, you know, I want to basically create compelling content. How do you think about, like, those specific goals? And then sort of how do you design around that? And let's start with Evan, because it seems like your ability to kind of take advantage of assets like the scoreboard and stuff like that could really, you know, make your experience a better one.
yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, I think we touched on a couple, of course. Seat upgrades is a huge one, and then in-app ordering is also great. So the two things right there to fill your dead time. And I know you talked about the NFL having lots of dead time, but really, when you break it down, it's actually not a lot. You don't want to miss one play in an NFL game, and like it's already down. Like every minute is precious. If I have a minute, you know, 2 minute break, I might run to the bathroom or whatnot. So it's already pretty tight, and even at the NBA games as well. So, I mean, it's a great question. Like I said, I mean, right now I would say the two big things that I think are great are seat upgrades and ordering apps from your phone. That's two things that, you know, once again deliver. I get a free beer or a new beer and a new seat. You know, that's value right there.
I'd say that I would agree. I don't know that there's as much dead time, maybe just in our sport. You know, I did work in baseball at one point in my career, and I have a hard time with any game that can theoretically last forever because there's no clock associated with it. So there's a lot of downtime in baseball. But I think, you know, in basketball, it's very quick-paced. I think a lot of business is done at a basketball game. I think the people that are not there to do business are there to have a great time. So we want to make sure that we can maximize the value proposition of going to an NBA game. So, look, the ebbs and flows of our business are very challenging, right? I mean, we can't control our product at the end of the day as much as we'd like to. We're not building widgets here. So the reality is you're going to have good years and you're going to have bad years. And so what we've got to be prepared for is how if someone's spending $500 for a family of four to go to a game and eat and have great seats and buy merchandise, and we lose by 20, they got to walk away saying, I had a hell of a good time, right? You wanted to have them come back. You can't say, well, I win, and they lost by 20, and it was the worst experience of my life. So, you know, we've got to find a way to entertain them. We've got to find a way to have them communicate with each other, and certainly with us. We've got to find a way to monetize that opportunity in the right way without being forceful or you know, too unassuming. So I think there's ways that a lot of buildings are finding that the experiential aspect of coming to a game is extremely important. What does the bar look like? I mean, you're building little mini cities within facilities these days. Great restaurants, great bars, great meeting points so that people are engaging on social media saying, I'll meet you at this bar at this time or in this restaurant at that time. I'll meet you in section whatever at the epicenter, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing. And so that downtime is really not really downtime. It's just a different way of experiencing the game at a different point in time. And so that's really what we've focused on and will continue to focus on to the best of our ability.
I mean, I think the way we look at it is, putting my fan hat on, is that, when you go to a game, you want to have those emotional moments, whether it's a slam dunk or a home run or a goal or something that's not related to the actual game, but it's a great entertainment moment, whether it's fireworks, whether it's the fact that, when we had our game at Stanford last year, we raised the 75-foot American flag using 7 hot air balloons, which had never been done before. So you do things that are absolutely iconic and memorable. Or when we had our groundbreaking, we set the Guinness record for the largest participatory groundbreaking. We had 6,256 people all dig at the same time for 2 minutes. You can watch it on YouTube. It's a pretty amazing sight. And so what are the things you can do in that dead time that you're saying that creates the type of emotional moment that's similar to seeing, Kobe slam, or to see, Hamilton hit a home run, or Wando score? And so I think it's finding those moments and not pushing it too hard. I remember going to Cavs games sometimes in Cleveland. They had the fire coming out in pregame. It's like, it's too much. I'm going to get burned. I'm going to die. It's like, so I think you can go too far. You have to be able to understand. I used to be in minor league baseball. You can kind of do anything. But if you understand, if you're at the top level, you have to have some respect for the actual game. And so understanding and having the judgment in order to pull that off is not an easy thing. And I think it's something that you have to kind of experiment. You're right.
There's a whole lot of trial and error in our business. I mean, I came from Orlando with the Magic, and we just built a new facility just 2 years ago. Felt like it was really advanced at the time, and now I look back and I think not so much. But, we have our own, at the time we had our own little internal broadcasting team that was separate than our TV broadcast partnership, and they would have certain angles of certain players. If your favorite player was at the time Dwight Howard, you could go to a channel and watch him just run up and down the court and just follow Dwight, right? And we thought, what a great idea. No one ever used it, right? And so the idea is, and how do you take that to your PDA so that through the app you could say, I want to follow Dwight, click, and you can see the same highlight that everybody else just saw on your PDA. Or then how do you use this big bad scoreboard that a lot of people are using now to say, okay, now I'm going to show it to the fan in a different, unique way that they can't get it at home, back to your initial question. So, there's different ways to kind of skin the cat, but I don't know that anyone's mastered it yet.
Great. So thinking about wins and losses, which it seems like are probably the biggest determinant of attendance anyway, how are these, and I'm definitely interested in Bill and the team's takes on this, how are these new buildings going to contribute to, better analytics about players and a better basketball product and, player evaluation for the teams? I know I've read a little bit about StatSync doing some really cool stuff in basketball. Me and David talked about Adidas doing some partnerships around data tracking for soccer. But yeah, how do you guys think about that?
Well, I think if you set aside analytics, which maybe is a dangerous thing to do, but as much as we'd like to say we can draw a direct correlation between the new buildings that come online and the performance on the field or on the court, I think that it does probably start with trying to be totally committed in every way to the home field, home court advantage, and the quality of play and the intensity experience, the fan contributing to the result. But also something I know is a big part of our practice is it's not so exciting, but it's behind the scenes and it contributes to the quality of the play, and that is the health and training aspect of the facility, and taking that, the practice facility, into account as it is part of what defines you as a brand, as an offering. It's part of your recruitment. It's part of recruitment and retention at the coaching level and the trainer's level for absolute top talent. And that's part of the balance that statistically I do believe does contribute to those, the better results in play. That's the primary driver of the successful results for the venue.
I think there's a lot that could be said. It's interesting. The idea sharing that goes from league to league and from professional to even collegiate or amateur sports. One of the things that college football teams, specifically at the collegiate level, have mastered is this whole campus experience, right? If you ever want to see real professional football, go to an SEC school. It's pretty impressive. And so what we've talked about is how do you create a campus-like environment within the facility that the players want to be there. They want to hang out. They want to spend time together so that when they have to stay after practice to get taped up, it doesn't seem like a chore. If they have to stay to get treatment, it's not a big deal. If they want to hang out with their buddies and watch the next game on TV, they can do that. If they want to come on a Sunday and have shoot around with a group of guys, because the veterans are getting them out on the court and they're trying to build some rapport. They can then go watch, Sunday Ticket in the Players Lounge. I mean, that's a big deal, and it creates a competitive advantage, I think. From a free agency perspective, they look at it and they say, wow, they're advanced, they get it, they understand me, they know what I'm looking for. And we do it in a way that's pretty efficient and easy for them to comprehend how best to utilize the space. Back to my Orlando example, one of the things that we thought we mastered, that it was a great learning, is that we built this really cool facility, and there's some of the best, and this isn't difficult to do, so I'll start there, nightclub in Orlando, on the outside of the building on top of a tower. It's fantastic, and it's very cool, and people in Orlando love it. But, you got that and 3 of the bars in the building, and after halftime, no one went back to their seat. And that's the honest to God truth. I mean, we're coming off an Eastern Conference Finals run, and as the third quarter in the new building, no one went back to their seat. The building held 18,500 people, and I'm not exaggerating, 6,000 of which would not come back after halftime. They were in bars, they were in other places. Hey, we made a lot of money, but the team lost a lot of games in the second half. And a lot of players were really frustrated that we didn't have the home court advantage in the third quarter coming out of halftime. We maybe got them back in a tight game with 4 to play, and sometimes it's too little too late. And so we've actually made that a point of emphasis as we talk about our facility, is making it the best basketball experience at the end of the day we can create. That's our #1 priority. Everything else is secondary. The best basketball experience, and that comes from the bowl to the player lounge and the player involvement and how they own their craft.
I know one thing we did, which I think is a little more unusual, to really create an experience, that helps you on the player side and helps you on the sporting side, is we actually asked the players. So I actually put a group together, Chris Wondolowski, John Bush, Jason Hernandez, some of my more experienced and veteran players who've been in the league, and they sat down with me, and we meet monthly, and they talk about what they want to see in the stadium. What do they want to see in the training room? Not what some person wants to sell me. What do the players actually want? And they feel that they get buy-in. And their #1 thing that they wanted was somewhere for their wives and girlfriends to be. That was the #1 thing. And very few locations think about how important that is, because when they're playing, they want to make sure that their wife, their kids are taken care of, they're in a safe situation, they're not by other angry fans, they're not stressing it, and that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And so I think our experience with it is just to obviously focus on the constituents, get the buy-in. It's just like any other management situation. And then changing gears on the Adidas My Coach, that's a great program that Adidas has pioneered with MLS. So basically, this season, for the first time, every player will wear a biometric monitoring device. So you'll know their heartbeat, you'll obviously know where they are, they'll have a GPS receiver. And so after every game, and even during the game, you'll know who's exerting more effort. You'll know that if that's higher or lower than actually the previous games. We debuted this in our All-Star game this last year, where we beat Chelsea 3-2. And 2 of our defenders, Steven Beitashour and Justin Morrow, were the highest rated players. And because of that, they got call-ins to the U.S. men's national team. Jurgen Klinsmann called them in. He was shocked at how well they were performing against these Chelsea players from the EPL. And so this data, and having it readily available, not only just for fans, because it's cool for fans to see it, but also for actually technical directors and sporting folks, could have a huge impact on the business. And I think we're lucky to have a partner like Adidas who's willing to invest in that. So it's great.
Mike, I added one thing real quick. Chip touched on it. We talked about the Magic losing games because fans weren't in the seats. And that's one of the founding philosophies behind Pogoseat, is if there are empty seats in an arena, we want them only to be in the nosebleeds. We want everyone in the stadium to be packed down as close to the action as possible, because that creates a better atmosphere. Maybe the players play better. Maybe the TV deals are more luxurious. All those reasons. So I think that's a huge point you made.
All right, so let's talk about ticketing for a second, because ticketing, it seems like there's been some innovation in the space. I mean, StubHub's, I guess, a more mature company, but they had a pretty nice exit to eBay a while ago. And we've seen some interesting stuff. Beyond the obvious value proposition that Pogoseat presents, what does the future of ticketing look like? I mean, we've seen dynamic pricing already a little bit. We've seen people like Liftopia do it in other industries. 5 years from now, other than probably not having paper tickets, how's ticketing going to look for us that's better?
Look, I'll preface this by saying we, the Warriors, are not sold on doing this, nor have we even talked about it. So I'll start there. Don't anybody think that we're going down this path. But I think the obvious thing is, again, I go back to the airlines model. We're slow adapters. Look what airlines have done in terms of putting people in seats. And I think they've mastered some things. I think they've stuck it to their consumer in other ways, and I think we have to be cautious about how you do that, and that's why I'm saying we have no real preconceived notion about what that looks like. But dynamic pricing is absolutely here to stay, in my opinion. I don't know that there would be a reason for that to change. It makes sense. I think the one thing that we in our business have to manage against, certainly in the NBA, and I don't know how much Dave has to fight with this, but in the secondary ticket market, you know, at the end of the day, we actually just looked at this in the NBA league meetings. You know, what are you selling your tickets to brokers for? And then what are they selling it on the secondary market for? And then what could you have sold that same ticket on the primary market for? And teams are leaving a lot of money on the table, and brokers are making a ton of money. And so the only way to mitigate that is by doing dynamic pricing and being better in terms of how you price your tickets, so that it squeezes the broker a little bit, so the broker business starts to dwindle, not increase. And not that we don't love our brokers, don't get us wrong, because they do serve a purpose and they do help us run our business, but I think there's something to be said for how do we maximize our own opportunities. And so, you know, we've got to take a strong look at that. And I think that's something you'll see. I think it's in terms of, do people want an aisle seat? Are they willing to pay more for that? I think there's something else to be said for that. Just like, you know, how close are you to the court? Are you on an aisle, and how easy is it for you to get up and go somewhere else? I think that has to be part of the thought process immediately. If not, you know, some teams I'm sure are already thinking about it. You know, I think the other thing that you got to look for in ticketing is, you know, how do you as a team continue to understand the person who may end up being the end user for the ticket? I think teams have struggled with that for years, certainly with paper tickets. You pass your ticket along to your buddy, you have no idea who that guy is. So how do we continue and call it, you know, the big brother position? How do we understand who is actually using the ticket so that we can provide them more value? I think it's not just about how does it serve a purpose for us, but ultimately how do we then craft an opportunity for that person specifically so they enjoy their experience to a greater degree if they otherwise would have just kind of slipped in under our nose and we didn't know who they were. So I think you're going to see a lot of that moving forward. You know, I don't know if you have some other thoughts.
I mean, I guess the way I look at it, and this is really, this view is shaped by a lot of, you know, games I've seen in Europe over the years. I kind of think the future of ticketing is actually membership. And I think if we're successful with the Earthquakes, what I would hope is that 5 years from now, when you're at an Earthquakes game, people don't think they're a ticket holder, they think they're a member. And they have a different association with the club than just like, oh, I'm holding a ticket. And that emotional connection will drive the value of our enterprise. And so that's really the way I see it. I think if you think about clubs like Barcelona, Real Madrid, Manchester United, their fans have that kind of connection. And there's no reason to think that here in America we couldn't do the same thing. It could be less transactionally focused and more focused on really this emotional attachment between an actual person, a fan, a fanatic, and their club. And I think membership is the way to do that. So I would encourage everyone here in technology is to create technology and applications that drive that. Because those are things that I know personally as the CEO and president we would want to see.
Yeah, these guys both made a lot of great points. From Pogoseat's perspective, we see ourselves as the extension of dynamic pricing throughout the game, because that value of the seat changes throughout the game based off the score, based off of how much time is left, based off of, you know, Harrison Barnes is pulled out of the game because the Warriors are winning by 20 and it's a blowout, for example. So all those factors affect the value of the seat. And I would say we're on the side of the teams and the venues. So whatever inventory is left on the table or revenue left on the table, we want to help them collect that throughout the game. And so, you know, that's what we exist for.
I think one thing that I challenge all of us to try to achieve or improve is just the overall experience, and to what extent can we just make it more seamless, more enjoyable. And most people, their day-to-day life is kind of, you go from one annoyance to maybe one pleasant thing, you know. But standing in line for a security check, messing around with a ticket, etc., is not an inherently pleasant thing in and of itself. Cashless cabin may not be so great either, but if there's something we can do to, you know, the progression of your excitement of any kind of event experience ought to be your arrival at the venue, right? You get some sense of the activity within, and it ought to be, you know, very welcoming, your fan service, and you ought to be treated like a guest in your home and everything like that. And so I think that would be the part of the solution of how you can make a drastic change and a competitive edge. Because in the end, besides all we've talked about the the performance of the athletes, you're competing against discretionary dollars for people's entertainment and investment, right? And it needs to be more fun than going to the movie theater or watching it at home. So how can that whole transaction be made more gratifying and fun?
Yeah, to that point, I think the other thing is access. You know, whether it's access to food and beverage as part of your ticket price, if it's access to certain spaces in the building as part of your price, is it parking? What is that? Is it a free ride on BART to come to the game? I think that has to be factored in, and I think you'll see more of that. And I think the membership model is a really good way to bake some of that stuff in based on tenure or whatever that looks like. So, you know, that's certainly something else we got to think about, is that as the cost of a ticket increases over the years, it can't just solely be about the game experience itself. It's all the other extracurricular things that go on around it that I think make it a really good value proposition.
Great. This is the last question, guys, so get your Q&A ready, or your Q's ready, and they'll get their answers ready. So anyway, I think a couple of you guys started to allude to this, but looking a few years down the line, what uses of technology excite you about making this a better experience for fans? What do I have to look forward to saying, all right, in a couple of years, I'm going to go to a Warriors game, and it's going to be awesome in a different way it is now because of X. So let's start with Bill and go down the line, I guess.
I don't have an agenda on this one. I'm really neutral, but I think it would be anything, you know, I'm getting a little hot and uncomfortable in this room, so I think it starts with your comfort. You know, it may sound odd, but controlling the the climate, the environment, the sound quality. You know, the sound systems are ever more economical and ever higher quality. So I would everything that can just the quality of the lighting and the color temperature of the lighting systems, everything to just improve the experience is what I would hope we can achieve.
Yeah, I would touch on the social aspects. When I go to a game in the future, I want to buy an upgrade. I want to be able to tap on an upgrade seat. I want to be able to see a photo of the view from that seat. I want to be able to see who's sitting next to me, what they're, if I'm connected through LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. Maybe I see someone at the Golden State game who's a possible business partner, and I want to buy them an upgrade and send it to them, and I meet them down in section 100, for example. So all those social features that enhance my game experience, where I meet new connections or whatnot. That's what I want to do.
I think the thing that's the coolest as a fan is that, right now when you go to the stadium, there's like another, 30 or 40,000 people there. But there's a virtual stadium that's even bigger of every single person watching the broadcast live. And I think using technology to connect to that stadium, that huge stadium, is, I think, a really cool idea. And I think there are things like Twitter that do that, like hashtags. I mean, there are people not in this room right now that are trying to connect to what we're doing here. That's a really powerful feature of social media and of technology. And I think to leverage that in a stadium environment, I think is really innovative, and hopefully we can accomplish that with the Earthquakes.
Yeah, to piggyback that, I think it's about creating experience envy. I think one of the things that we most appreciate is about social media and the instantaneous aspect of gathering information is that typically we get excited about things that people have seen or experienced or been a part of and wish we could have seen it too. So we live vicariously through them on some level. So how do we help make that process a little easier so that people coming to our games or going through our experiences, they share that with their, call it the echo chamber, or their friends who hopefully are either fans or fence-sitting fans, or hopefully people that we want to become fans. They share that experience in a meaningful way that's a great representation of our brand. And so, teams have to help that. You all in this room have to help that. And ultimately, we need people to embrace it in a way that, they become an extension of our sales team. That's what we're in the business of doing, is creating, monetizable opportunities. That's how we drive our business. And, the reality is, I think our sales force grows exponentially thanks to social media and other platforms.
Great. All right, let's open it up to some Q&A. All the way in the back.
So there's a lot of talk about the venue kind of being the epicenter of the event. Here, let me step out from behind that. Hi. Yeah. And there's a lot of talk about kind of the connected venue where you spend millions of dollars. Cisco routers, I have the Wi-Fi there, you have the connected venue. One of the biggest hurdles with the connected venue is getting people to connect with the venue. I mean, your typical individual, you tell them, hey, by the way, if you go to this particular, if you go to Candlestick, if you hop on the Wi-Fi with your iPhone, you can immediately be connected.
They will have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. How do you get them connected to the connected video, with the venue, without them having to think about it, worry about it, or anything like that?
I mean, I think one thing that I've seen successful is you don't just boost the Wi-Fi, but you also boost, like through distributed DAS systems, the actual, just your phone, you know, the data on your phone. So like some people, like my mom, is not going to connect to the Wi-Fi, but if, you know, her 3G or 4G works better, then hopefully she can access the other content that we're creating as part of the experience. So, I mean, it's expensive, and I know, especially big stadiums like for the 49ers, I don't even know if it's possible, frankly. But hopefully with our stadium, it's only 18,000, there's a way to pull it off.
So why not focus on the carrier repeaters as opposed to the Wi-Fi?
Well, you want both, because the Wi-Fi is going to enable more, you want as much broadband as you can have, right? So if I have more like, you know, forward thinking or people who are more tech savvy, and they're like, oh, I'm going to jump on the Wi-Fi because I know it'll be faster, that'll take some heat off the system where the fans can't really do it. So we want to provide as many on-ramps as we can, if possible, right?
You mentioned about the data collection on the players during a match. Is it part of the discussion then to make that information during the match available to the fans in something really simple to understand? I mean, you know, the Ultras were a little busy during the game, but at halftime, and also for the rest of the fans during the game, they're going to want to see players do maps and things like that, and you know what the possession statistics are and all of that. Is that going to be? Is it something that, like the Opta data that MLS has, is that going to be something that maybe somebody here can develop apps that can tap into that data and provide it to the fans on the fly while the game is going on?
I mean, initially the plan is to have that through our Matchday Live app, which is on the iPad or Android or whatever device you need it on. But over time, the idea is to get that API out to other people so that they could actually use the data streams to create really cool ways to view it. I think that's the way to drive the most adoption. Because we don't really, I mean, we have a team in New York and they have a digital team, they're great, and I'm sure they're going to have some really interesting way to look at it. But that's not to say that we don't want to foster innovation and entrepreneurial thinking around, you know, other ways to view it. So yeah, it will be. And to watch the game, that's another reason, like, you come to an Earthquakes game, you want to bring your iPad and actually have a second screen and then be able to see all those things. That's pretty cool. It's like, oh yeah, look at this guy, he moved around, he ran 6 miles, and this guy only ran 2 miles. Like, that's kind of interesting to know, right? So.
You might have been in our office today because we had this exact conversation. And I looked at my colleague in the back and he looked at me and smiled. I think the reality is you're right. People want to see it, and we got to figure out how best to provide it to you. The technology exists. I mean, we're doing it through StatsInc now. We can pull, you know, through any one of their algorithms what a player just did. I mean, we saw Kevin Cote in the back of the room saw today the Harrison Barnes dunk against the Minnesota Timberwolves actually play out through an equation, right? But you actually saw it, kind of mapping it out and seeing what actually took place to set the pick, to get the pass, to cut the lane, to do the dunk, and all that kind of fun stuff. It's great. Now, the reality is there's a fine line between what you provide your fan base and what your basketball operations team is comfortable with you providing, right? And the players. I mean, let's be honest. They pay attention. They know. And if I was to put a stat out there that said a certain player drags up and down the court every time he's on the court, not a good way to build his brand or make him feel like we're protecting his interests. Maybe a good way to keep him honest, but we'll let coach do that, right? So, you know, it's how do you find the right type of information that's got teeth that people want to engage with while not overextending yourself and putting yourself in a difficult position because of something you haven't thought through all the way.
Okay. There's been a little bit of a clear contrast, I guess, between you know, the gentleman from the Earthquakes is talking, the gentleman from the Warriors is talking when it comes to talking about your new venues and the problems that you're trying to solve. Pretty clear contrast to me, at least, it seems to be the size. That because the Earthquakes actually do have a smaller venue, they're able to have greater control over the ultimate experience that venue itself is actually provide. So I don't know if there's been any thought in like the NBA world or the NFL world of actually looking at maybe having smaller venues instead of these large behemoths that now you have all these kind of connectivity issues, and you can't control the environment.
It's well, ironically enough, we're actually talking about a venue about the same size or even a little smaller. And to your point, though, some of that is back to my initial point about the overarching experience, which is how do you create an intimate experience where people engaging in communities with each other and feel like they're really part of the action. And that's one of our top priorities in building this facility. I'll tell you something interesting. Some of that has to do with location, too. It's not just size. I actually met with the New York Knicks a couple of months ago, and we were talking about their Wi-Fi, and they said they could spend millions of dollars a year and not have enough because of the train station underneath and all the people on the street tapping into their Wi-Fi system. There's no way they could ever have enough, right? They've got within MSG, if you've never been to Madison Square Garden, they have a theater that seats 8,000 to 10,000 people in addition to the basketball court, which is on level 3, I think. Plus you've got the train station underneath and a subway station, and then you got all the people outside on the street. They could never supply enough, so everybody's tapping in, and they're just literally trying to find a way to capture all that information from the people who were stealing, their Wi-Fi versus trying to provide more. I think that's a challenge for them, and that location is really something that hurts them. What our location suspended over the bay does for us, I don't know yet. Right? We'll see. Maybe we'll hear the salmon talking to each other.
Financial investment that you guys are going to make in enhancing the fan experience will impact ticket prices at all? And if it does, is there any concern in outpricing your fan base?
Yeah, there's always that concern. And I wouldn't say that investment in technology is the sole reason why one would increase ticket pricing. I think it's the overall cost of operating the business, and that's one component of that. Look, there's not a day that goes by that our owners don't look at me and say, yeah, we're going to make this investment, but you're going to quantify it, right? So it's not necessarily about the ticket price. I'll tell you that the reality is, and I oversee the corporate partnerships department within our organization, it's more about sponsorship. I mean, yeah, there's tickets tied to that too, but there's a number of mediums in which to buy tickets. When you talk about increasing Wi-Fi, it's okay. If you're going to invest in an app and you're going to spend X amount of money on an app, how are you going to monetize that? How are you monetizing your website? How are you monetizing your mobile website? What are you doing in social, right? And so we're going to have a much more commercial culture than we've ever had. Simply because the cost of investing in the technology goes up, someone's got to monetize it, and it's going to have to be done through ad sales, just like it is online. I mean, I don't know that we're any different than other businesses in that sense.
I mean, I think this is an advantage with MLS is because we don't have as high a cost basis as most of the other leagues. So we can, right now we have a $25 average ticket price. In our new stadium, it'll probably be a little over $30, but that's still, I mean, for a family of 4, far more affordable than going to an NFL game. And so I think for us, we see that as a great opportunity because I kind of hope that the other teams all ask for more dollars because then that might make more fans for the Earthquakes or for soccer because we're a rising sport and more of a challenger sport, and I think we can take advantage of that.
Can you guys envision a technology that recreational players in your sports would use while playing to drive attendance or interest? For example,
yeah, I mean, the one thing you're supposed to be able to do with the My Coach, and I don't know if it's exactly fully launched yet, but I mean, they've sent me a pair of shoes with a little thing in it. I haven't figured out exactly how to use it yet because they don't have the app done. But you could actually compare yourself to like Stephen Badishore or Chris Wondolowski. So it's like, oh, I just went out and I played in a rec game. Then, oh, how cool, I just saw this, compared this to Wando's last game when he played against the Red Bull or whatever. So I think there are ways to do that, which are kind of cool and fun and hip and trendy. So I think that would be the best example I would know.
I would think that, I don't think we're close, but I have no reason to think that it's not a great scouting device. I don't know that, an NBA team's going to put one on me, but just saying. But I do think it would be interesting, certainly if the NBA and the NCAA ever figure out a way to work together for some of these monitoring devices, that you then use that as a scouting device to understand the guy's true vertical leap, or how hard they work on the court, how fast they run a 40, how good their hands are. I think all those things are, right now, still done from a scouting perspective with guys with clipboards when they're live and at the game. As you do these tryouts and you do open tryouts, a number of teams do them, how do you then find some technology to put on these guys to truly understand what their capabilities are versus just, if you ever go to an NBA or an NFL scouting combine, these guys are still jumping up to, tap the you know, the bar as high as they can to see what their 2-foot vertical is. You know, it's not rocket science. Now, what they do with that information is quite advanced, but I think the capturing of it's got a long ways to go, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that we won't be there in the next even 10 to 15 years, maybe even sooner.
So what do you guys think about the sort of battle brewing between StubHub and Ticketmaster, where Ticketmaster is, I guess, paying up a little bit more for the secondary market, you know, doing deals with the NFL to get the sort of like organic season ticket holders onto their marketplace? What do you think about that sort of dynamic now, and then maybe 2 to 3 years from now when everything's paperless, does that affect your view on ticket distribution, where it's really easy to send tickets back and forth between people?
Yeah, I mean, I think look, I give StubHub a ton of credit. First in the market, best to brand their service, most aggressive, far more aggressive than Ticketmaster's been. I think the model, in my opinion, is the NFL model and what they've been able to accomplish with Ticketmaster, and I think the NBA needs to do a better job, and we've talked about that recently. They've got to do a better job of marketing their secondary ticket platform through Ticketmaster in order to compete with StubHub. Because right now, you know, they're a Xerox, right? I mean, they're a Kleenex. I mean, they when you say, I got to blow my nose, I want a tissue, you say, I want a Kleenex, or I'm going to make a copy on a Xerox machine. I mean, they were first to market with it. They did a better job. The Ticket Oak, the whole nine. They're masterful at how they position their product. And I think Ticketmaster's got to do a better job of being more aggressive in their marketing spend to counteract that personally. And I think the leagues have to take a significant stance in that. If their ticketing platform is Ticketmaster, they've got to be better about that. I mean, look, the biggest battle that we've got, and probably you guys as well, in battling the secondary ticketing platform is, look, we're still got single game tickets on the market, and then you got the secondary market. So there's actually 2 different markets out there moving a number of tickets, and we're trying to get as many people to have their butt in the seat as possible. And so, you know, what we've got to figure out is how do we sell as many season tickets as possible so that we don't have a primary, you know, call it market, and the only way to get tickets is through the secondary market, and then how do you take advantage of that? I mean, that's the sweet spot, I think, for most teams. I mean, it used to be in our business, and kind of give you a peek behind the curtain, you would say, okay, let's use the round number of 18,000 seats in a facility. Well, if you work backwards from that number, you're going to do 2,000 in groups every night. So that's group tickets where you got churches and elementary schools or whatever moving tickets, right? And you want those group tickets because you give other people access to your product. So you want them in the building because one day they may buy. They may buy single games, they may buy season tickets, they may buy partial plans. So now you're at 16. You got another, call it 800 to 1,000 in comps. Now all of a sudden you're call it 15 for quick math, right? And then you've got the rest you hope to be single, let's call it another 1,000 of single game buyers. So now you're at 14. And that's where how many season ticket holders you want? You want 14,000. Great. I think the reality is you would prefer to have 16,000 season ticket holders in 2,000 groups. That's it. And then the way you get tickets is everybody goes to the secondary ticket market because season ticket holders are going to resell their tickets. They're going to do it. It's a way to offset the cost that they have in being a season ticket holder. And for certain games with dynamic pricing, they make a penny on it, right? So, you know, that is where I think it evolves to ultimately, and I'm interested to see how quickly it gets there.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you know, I feel that we're, as a property, you know, owner, we're investing all this money into making earthquakes. I kind of wonder, like, why should anyone else make any money off the tickets other than me? Right. At the end of the day. So, like, I think if we're doing our job right long term, you know, I wouldn't buy stock in those companies. Let's put it that way.
All right, last few questions. Right here. We got guy with startups.
Given the growing international consumption of American sports, how would you provide them with something comparable to the in-stadium experience, short of like a charter service where you fly them here?
I mean, the NBA, well, look, the best international sport is football / soccer. But I think the NBA is catching up and making a lot of ground. I think a second is the NBA, more so than baseball or football or any of the other sports. That said, you know, the NBA by nature is conservative in terms of how they kind of venture into a situation. So, look, the NBA is doing a pretty good job of monetizing China and Europe. The teams themselves don't have an opportunity to do that currently. What we're trying to do is pull people out of those markets and bring them here versus finding ways to activate our brands in those markets. That's the NBA's oversight. So we're challenged with that, but the NBA does do a good job of highlighting its stars, which ultimately is what we are. We're a star market. I mean, we're not football where you got helmets on and jerseys on, right? Our guy walks into a room, you're going to know when an NBA player walks in. One, because they're abnormally large, and two, you notice their face. So, I mean, the reality is we're a league based on stars. So we market our stars really well overseas. You hope as a franchise you have one of those guys, right? We don't have that luxury right now. We have a very good group of character guys that are great team players. We don't have superstars. If we were to win a title, Steph Curry becomes a superstar like overnight. And any guy in the NBA will tell you their goal is to win a championship because their jersey sales and their marketability personally goes up. And so that's what shoe companies do. Don't think that Nike and Adidas aren't smart in terms of who they sign to their portfolio. If you pay attention, who does Adidas lead with? It used to be, Duncan, Kevin Garnett. No, Duncan was a Nike. Kevin Garnett. What's that?
Arenas?
Well, Derrick Rose, right? That's what I'm getting to. So it used to be all these guys in their stable, right? Well, then Dwight Howard and Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose sells tennis shoes, not Dwight Howard. Big men don't sell tennis shoes. Guards do. I mean, Derrick Rose has a place this last year with a bad knee, and he's on every other commercial. And so that tells you how superstars consider it. So, that creates somewhat of an arms race for the teams to get superstar athletes that have some marketability overseas, so that it helps us grow our business here based on overseas companies wanting to invest here in the States. That will change. It will take time. But ultimately, the boundaries will start to dissipate. But I think everybody's got to get more comfortable in terms of how you're marketing your brand so that people do it the right way and it's a positive reflection on the leagues, not a negative one. Because, look, as much as we don't like to trust our peers around the league, there are some teams that do a horrible job at it. And it's not in our best interest to let them take the lead. Some of that is that we've got to wade into it in the right way so that we all capitalize on it accordingly.
I mean, I think for the Quakes and MLS, one big advantage with association football is that we can actually do player transfer with international teams. And so, for instance, this last season, we had a player on loan from Tottenham Hotspur, Simon Dawkins. We had him on loan for the last 2 seasons. He had started in their academy when he was 14 years old. And so people in England, Spurs fans, wanted to check out what was going on with the Earthquakes because they had a young, developing player who was actually getting playing time and scoring goals and having assists and contributing to our Supporter Shield Championship season last year. So that actually drew fans, ratings from England, from a Premiership fan base. And so there are really unique ways in order to partner that way that are kind of interesting. We created a lot of YouTube content that actually could be distributed obviously all over the world on Simon and how he was doing and his adjustment and all this kind of stuff. And that was a really cool way to try to really broaden our base internationally, and it really didn't cost us that much. It was just leveraging obviously that player relationship.
If any of you ever want to know the right way to market a league internationally, follow the EPL. I mean, and the MLS is on its way, but they do it better than anyone. You can go to a website of AC Milan, which is not an EPL team, I understand it's Serie A, but they're going to have their website in 5 or 6 different languages because there are no boundaries. And so they are internationally marketed, and each team does it well, and they do it exceptionally well. Go to Man U, Man City, even Tottenham. I mean, it is really impressive how they do it.
Last question.
What about the fantasy? Is there anything there? Do you think that it detracts, contributes to the engagement, the stadium, or even the fan base?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I don't have time to play anymore, but I think it's great. I think it's a great way for people who just love the competition and doing something with their buddies that may not be overly engaged in a league or a sport to get more engaged with it and follow it more closely. My brother's much younger than me, and he comes to a Warriors game when he's in town, and he's got his iPad out, and he's tracking his fantasy team, and he's texting his buddies, and he's watching the game simultaneously, and he's fully in. I mean, he's fully engaged, and so I think it's great. I think it's great for the sport. I think our players get into it and enjoy it. I think everybody is really, it's interesting kind of how it's evolved over time, but I don't see any negatives to fantasy sports in all candor.
Yeah, I think it's been great for all the different sports. I mean, in soccer it's kind of difficult because there's not that much scoring, so it's kind of, it's been less popular. But it's obviously a key way to be successful. And I mean, I always think when you go over to England, and I was at Wembley for a game, it was actually international, San Marino against England, you walk in, you can bet on the game right there. Who's going to score first, who's going to, there's a shutout, odds on every single thing. So it is important to understand that in a lot of these other countries, there's betting associated with the games actually at the venues, and that's a huge revenue stream for them. And that's obviously something that's not legal here in the United States, but it's very interesting to kind of.
By the way, that will change. It's going to happen. I mean, bank on it. No pun intended. I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, look, you can see we're always a little late. Again, a little conservative. Don't want to upset the Bible Belt and people getting upset about the sin associated with sports and entertainment. It's going to happen. Betting is going to be a very integral part of every league in the next 10 years. There's, again, how do you continue to monetize the game? You got to look for every avenue. As soon as they make sure that they can control the player element and them not betting on the games, which I think they're making, which is all candor, I think they're making great inroads there. Yeah, and I think it's only a matter of time, right? You just got to have stiffer penalties put in place, and I just think it'll happen. I don't think we're going to avoid it.
Great. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Big round of applause for our panel. All right, quick couple things. We're going to be doing a couple more panels, including one on gambling and fantasy gaming in the next couple months. So stay tuned, hang out, have a beer. There's a guy's bathroom half a stairwell down over there if you need to use that. And thanks again. Bye.